home is fine. We are doing well. I just want to say a few things before I invite our Vice Chancellor to officially open this session. Professor Otieno and I began this conversation of being engaged at KCA University way back in the late 2018. And that's when we did a proposal to the U.S. Department it's called the U.S. Department of State, so that you could spend some time at KCA University as a Fulbright scholar. You know, that proposal received very good reviews and was selected for funding. But of course, the disruptions of COVID-19 and others made it not possible for him to join us as a Fulbright scholar for 2020. However, we do know, in fact, we have also learned from the stories we have heard that, you know, our late Amos, Walter Midamba told his child Noah that when the door closes, you try to use the window. And when the window closes, you try to use the wall. And because of that, we actually have to find a window to use. And today, we have a webinar which is going to help us begin this process of remote engagement. Initially, before we even thought about this COVID-19, Professor Otieno and I, we were thinking about how we can enhance e-learning at KCA University, how we can integrate critical thinking into our curriculum. This was before we heard about COVID-19. But now we actually find that what we were planning to do, we actually wanted to fast it forward. So I just wanted to invite Professor Midamba to officially welcome Professor Otieno to KCA University, and then we'll give him time to continue. Thank you and welcome, Professor Otieno.
Thank you.
Professor Noah Midamba.
Oh, thank you, Professor Joshua Bagaka, and particularly for mentioning my father's name. My father's picture sits right on my back, so he's watching and listening to you this morning. Otieno, we are very excited to have you join us for this milestone. You are not only representing one of the finest of this country who is abroad, but you are embracing the kind of system that is very important for the African continent, to embrace diaspora that are overseas, to enhance our capacity to change this country. Telemedicine is one of those. We have highly qualified medical people. There are about 3,000 in America, and there are about another 3,000 in Europe. And yet we are bringing Cuban doctors to help us here. So what I'm excited about, and let me just say a few things and then of course turn over to you. Much has not changed in academy in the last 1,000 years. Since education, higher education was founded in Morocco by Fatima. And so nothing has changed. We're doing the same thing. We lecture, we do exams, they go, we bring the others, and they continue the structure. The same relationship between the students and faculty remain the same. The structure remains the same. What's happening in particularly the Anglo-African situation is that we're following British Commonwealth model. And the British Commonwealth model has come and gone. such that the world has moved very far away from there. And so what we're finding out is the library are still very stale. They look like monastery. That's what is happening in Africa. We still believe in juju. The more, the better. And I watched the other day with the amazement, a rainmaker in Bungoma. And people are bringing goats and sheep and money to the rainmaker. And so the point is, this is the situation that still run Africa. And therefore, if you look at the changes that has taken place around the world, take India, for instance. India will be a very advanced country right now with over 1 billion people. But India culture has taken it back so that they have not moved to the state where China has moved, and of course where Japan is, and Europe and America. And so there is such a pull and push in Africa, which is pulling us back. If you look at our cultural relationship and the way we relate to each other, we probably spend 10 or 15 minutes hugging and holding each other for a meeting that need to take 30 minutes. And so these are some of the things that the time has come for us to really look forward and begin changing those things such that we can match with the rest of the world. COVID-19, yes, is a big threat to the world. But one of the things that has happened with COVID-19 is that it has no demarcation. It's hitting the rich and the poor the same way. It's hitting the high advanced country, like the US and Japan and Europe, the same way like it hit, anywhere in Bungoma or here in Kenya. And so it's brought us together. Now, this is giving us incredible opportunities as Africans to leapfrog and catch up with where the rest of the world is. And for us to wake up and have a new mindset. There are just three things that are very important in this situation. One is we were waiting for the big disruption in our system, and it has happened. COVID-19 has come and disrupted us and kept us out of the normal face-to-face classroom to where we need to think. And so we are now in a situation that we need to think about where our next investment is going to be. And if we are able to invest in technology wisely, we'll be able to catch up with the rest of the world in terms of knowledge transfer and delivery. Secondly, we need to rethink higher education. What the value of higher education. The data demonstrate that there is not one single country in the world that has developed without higher education. We know about the Scandinavian, we know about Europe, Japan, US, that has invested a lot of resources in education. And therefore, it is the only way out, for Africa. And so we need to think about pedagogical approaches, complete from what we're used for. Faculty-student relationship need to change, and the role of the library, as we know it, must change. And we need to invest seriously in technology infrastructure such that we are able to catch up with the rest of the world. Thirdly, we need to redesign the future of colleges and universities such that telemedicine, which has been around in America and Europe for many years, can be the core relationship between our hospitals, dispensary over here, and our diasporas that are sitting on the metro. Someone like Otieno can teach in multiple universities in Africa and facilitate knowledge. And that does need to be accepted within our education framework such that we can close the gap. There is serious gap in Africa. There's so many students, and there are very few faculty who are qualified to teach. And therefore, drafting and reducing face-to-face as a cornerstone must take place. So a mix of that and also remote learning need to take place so we can reach far-flung area of Africa. We can reach the ghettos and informal setting such that we can help your Kali, we can help the farmer so that they have more knowledge about the soil, the product, and market, for their goods and services. These are really very, very important that will help Africa facilitate our colleges and university system to move forward. Last question that I want to leave before Otieno take over is only 3 W's questions. One is, where do we come from? We need to really understand where we come from. Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Chonua Achebe. Understand the fundamental of what we are all about, our culture, our behavior. Where do we come from? Who are we? Secondly, where are we right now? Understanding where we are sitting is so important before we embark on a new journey. And I think the most pertinent question is, as Africans, where do we want to go for the future? Mao Zedong was not only a revolutionary, he was a visionary. Mao, I spent over 6 months at Pudong, at the University of Pudong, as a visiting scholar, and I understand what Mao has marked. So what is happening in China was envisioned by Mao, who changed the culture, who changed the mindset to Chinese. And they've envisioned that Africa will become part of the puzzle of the Chinese growth. What does that mean? It means exploiting Africa for the betterment of China. Now, we were colonized, now we are being exploited. We are rich, resource rich, but poor in terms of knowledge and vision. So this is what needs to change. Thank you, Professor Otieno. You can now take on.
Thank you, thank you.
Professor Gao?
Thank you, Prof. I just, hello? Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry, I just had a network issue, but Professor Otieno, please. Prof, can you unshare your slide so that I put in mine?
Oh.
Okay, let me just do it. Okay.
You got it?
Yeah, I think, okay, good. So let me just share this. Okay, so just before I introduce Prof, let me just say a few things. One is your microphone is off, your video is off, so that's by default. This is a webinar, it's not a meeting subscription. And then the other thing is the audience, please try to send your questions on the Q&A facility. There's a button down there. So if you have any question, put it there. At the end of Professor Otieno's talk, we are going to go through them and Prof will respond to that. And we are trying to stream the same event live on Facebook. So for those who are not able to join us, they'll be able to get us via Facebook. Professor Onesimus Otieno, he's a professor of biological science in Oxford University in the US. He is a graduate of Eastern African, the Baraton University, Ohio University, and Oklahoma State University. And he's a very accomplished facilitator in what we are doing today, in especially LMS systems. He's done quite a lot of that in a number of countries, Kenya, Nigeria, Senegal, and the US. He has over 10 years of experience in that. And he's been involved in quite a number of projects also in capacity development training. And he just told me that in 2018, actually he served as a Carnegie Fellow at the Adventist University of Africa, School of Postgraduate Studies, to help them develop an online curriculum. Prof, his recent award is in this year. We'll bring him to USIU, so I think we'll be seeing a lot more of him around. But also University of East Anglia and Baraton. So I think much of 2020, I don't know about the COVID situation, Prof, but we hope to, maybe to be online, but still it will be good to have you around. Prof has been, in terms of partnership, you can see his involvement with the NSF, that is the National Science Foundation, the US, the Geological Survey, the USFWS and USAID, together with NASA. So it means when it comes to research, he has really partnered with some very big institutions. He has a great passion when it comes to teaching and mentoring. He has mentored quite a number of young people across a variety of disciplines at postgraduate level. And he's married to Evelyn, and together they have 2 children, very young kids, 9 and 7. In fact, when I was talking to him, he said this is the best time for him to work because everybody around him is asleep. Nobody's going to get crushed into his Zoom meeting.
Hopefully.
So, Prof, it's very good to have you. I think it's the start of our interaction engagement. Given what we've seen here, there's a lot that we need that you can deliver. So I think this is going to be our first and beginning of a long interaction. So Prof, I think just let you get started, and you have something around an hour to give a talk, and then after that we're going to have the
Thank you. This is to me a very high honor and privilege. Yes. You hear me fine?
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay. This is a very high honor and privilege for me to return home. And I have to admit that this has been a very long project for me, where for the last 6 years or so, I have been trying to gravitate back and participate back home as much as I can. And this was marked by my recent 2018, I was able to go back to Nairobi as a Carnegie Fellow. And I was just mentioning a few moments ago that as much as I wanted to be really home, I still have family in Nairobi. And as much as I wanted to be home, I have spent the last 6 years more in West Africa than in Kenya. But, you know, we're getting closer, and that is very comforting. So today I will be talking about online pedagogy and remote engagement during the COVID pandemic. Now, this is a presentation I am doing through KCA University. And as much as this has happened, COVID to some of us has not been a big surprise, because we anticipated that at some point we needed to be prepared to do online delivery. And as early as 2018, I actually visited the campus of KCA University. And we talked about this, and right now I feel like Noah saying, hey, it is going to rain, it is going to rain, and finally now it is raining, and fortunately, we actually do have a way out. So I will be speaking about a few things. So I'll be putting the whole context of COVID-19, and then basically we'll talk about some institutional preparedness items, and then we'll talk about what makes a sound curriculum and how we develop facilitating and engaging discussions. And we'll talk about assessments also, because there's really a trio in all this. We have the learning outcomes, we have the content, and then we have assessment. Those people from the education background are very familiar with this. So we'll be talking about that quite a bit. Now, we do know that COVID-19 started somewhere late last year, and now in the early part of this year, the first quarter, we have 192 countries that have closed all schools and universities. That means 90% of the world's learners, students, are basically at home. That means in terms of numbers, we have 1.6 billion. And the major unique challenge here is that this closure happened suddenly. And then the other part is that we don't know how long it's going to last. You see, we can't wait it out because we don't know how long it is. Now, the sudden closure is such that when we closed, it did not give us time to prepare. I usually like to tell my students, being on time is late. So if you're trying to do something now, you're already late. The people who have something are those who actually invested in those systems a lot earlier. Now, my estimation is that this is going to be the single most disruptive element in the history of academics. Now, a brief look at the map, and this is found on the UNESCO site, is basically the whole world has closed down. We have Greenland here. Yes.
Prof, just share your slides, please. Sorry.
Sorry, I thought I had it. Okay. Are we there?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, I am so sorry. All right. So these are basically the statistics that I talked about a minute ago. Now, this is what it looks physically. I like maps, and I think Professor Gao will like this also. Right. Now, so what you see in purple and pink, those are the countries that are actually doing something, some closure, either national or regional, or some form of closure. So you can see basically the whole world is blanketed with closures. The only small places we have is Papua New Guinea here, we have Belarus, we have Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and somewhere here, Nicaragua. The whole world is basically closed. And that tells you that we have to revolutionize. And what is happening in most of these places is while school is closed, everybody is going to remote learning. And remote learning is coming in many ways. All right, so something really quick, and I'll integrate some of this into my discussion about, I'll integrate about my journey and basically what brings me here. Now, for most of us, teaching is something that a decision we made last minute. For me, it was just a few months before I graduated. Then I decided, hey, maybe I need to try teaching. I'll go there maybe 2 or 3 years, and then I'll come back to industry and I'll have a great time. Well, that was 18 years ago. So the 2 and 3 years basically lasted a long time. Now, and for some of you, this might be interesting. I was talking to some friends. I have been in the same institution for the last 18 years, which is very unusual for many people to actually last that long. But what I like about academia is that while I am in the same institution for that long, I am really not doing the same thing. And when I look back where I started, it's a totally different job. I do different things. Now I even spend a lot of time internationally. which is something that I didn't do before. So things change a lot. Now, one of the things that facilitated this transition was I was hired in the biological sciences, but then we needed somebody to coordinate the biology education program. So that transitioned me from the sciences into education. And basically I straddled both worlds. Now, this forced me to learn on the job about pedagogy. And we talked about problem-based learning, case studies, blended learning, flipped classroom, and so on. So over time, something came up very more recently, where we started developing the critical thinking programs. And the critical thinking programs basically had the idea that we have students who go through our programs, but then when they go to the workplace is not organized in neat patterns like the classroom is. So they have a problem basically transitioning into it. So we started teaching through this critical thinking model. And what this fosters is to make the classroom more interactive. And in order to make the classroom more interactive, we had to remove some things from the classroom because teachers feel like you have to cover so many chapters. And in order to cover those chapters, then there's no time really, you have to spend a lot of time going through lectures and so on. But what critical thinking did, it forced us to have an interactive time in the classroom. And so we removed the lecture material and put it online so students can access it outside the classroom. That way, when we come to classroom, it's a more meaningful interaction. There is what taught me to basically start putting things more online. Then about 10 years ago, I started also teaching online for the University of Phoenix, which is probably one of the largest institutions for online education. In fact, at one time, University of Phoenix had 400,000 students all over the world. So they pretty much were pioneers in this area, and they have accomplished quite a lot. So in recent years, I have been back in the homeland, mostly doing curriculum development and pedagogy training for vocational education and agricultural education and training, mostly in West Africa, but more recently, I spent time in Kenya at the Adventist University of Africa, helping them set up their online curriculum for the Masters in Public Health. Now, like you were told a moment ago, we now have a Carnegie Fellowship coming up for the year 2020-2021 for US International University and Baraton combined. So right now, we're actually exploring, because it was about teaching online. So the question is, do I have to be in Nairobi to actually train about teaching online, or can we just go ahead and do it? So we are still exploring those things, and I'm so delighted that through those relationships, we are able to contact other universities, and KCA has been a very instrumental part in all this program. All right. So this is something some people remember. When the computer came, everybody got surprised, especially when they started saying, we're going to start computerizing education. We start doing, bring smart classrooms where we have PowerPoints and we have internet in the classroom. Well, some teachers felt like they want to run away. And I kind of feel that this is what is going on right now. The age of the computer has come and gone. Right now, it is the Internet of Things. And some of us feel scared, and we feel like we're about to run away and hide. Well, the big question is, will technology replace us? Will they be bringing robots to teach the students, or will students go on the internet and nobody knows what will happen? Well, the reality is, I think technology will not replace teachers, but teachers who use technology will probably replace those who do not. And that's really the interesting thing. It is not personalized, that teachers and so on. It's really a wave that is taking, it's a fundamental wave that is changing the way we look at things. So the tools were that you go to the classroom and the teacher stands up with a piece of chalk and speaks and speaks and speaks. But more and more, we have been introducing more tools in the classroom, and the internet is just one of those things. So I think what is going on here is the pandemic has forced us to do things that we desired to do, we wanted to do, but now they have become a priority. And unfortunately for some, there will be some who will be thrown out into the sea. But some of us who had invested earlier will basically have an opportunity to ride the tide. Now, my feeling, and this is mine, and I know I'm not alone, is that we will never go back. The thing is, when we transition back, it will be not the old same thing. It will be a different thing because we have invested so much and changed our mindsets in what is happening now. Now, and when I look at it, it is not really a bad thing necessarily. Of course, there are some things that are going to have undesired consequences, but let's also look at the various opportunities that this presents. I used to have a really hard time going and traveling and doing all these things because just going from here to Nairobi takes me 2 days just to get there and another 2 days to come back. So that's already 4 days taken. And if I'm going there for 4 days, then half the time is actually spent on traveling. But now that institutions have locally been forced to develop their e-learning infrastructure, I can basically just zoom in and out of the classroom, and I haven't even moved out of my house. So in a brief discussion with Professor Gao and Professor Bagaka, I came to realize that some of the things that KCA University is looking at are the listed items here. We have 8 of them, and we have about how to plan for online lesson, principles of effective online teaching, and so on. And you see, I have actually categorized them into 2. There are things that happen before you get into the classroom, and there are things that happen during the classroom. And you notice actually the way I use the classroom now is the classroom used to be that room on the 3rd floor where you go and teach something. But now the classroom is anywhere in any format that people gather to learn. And so just this one thing has literally changed our vocabulary to where, even students and learners and teachers, the definition of all these terms is actually going to change. So anyways, so I'll be addressing all this and integrating them into the whole process as we speak. So I have put them into 4 categories mainly. Now, we talk about preparedness. And preparedness means basically training. Now, there's a way we train faculty, we train students, and the institution also has to have the infrastructure to do all that. Now, the challenging part, I think, is most of faculty get trained in the traditional system. Now, we get trained in the traditional system, and then we start teaching, and halfway into our teaching careers, we are told to basically transition to online. This can be very disturbing, and I have a few suggestions later, but it is very difficult for you to actually speak a language that you have not spoken before. So we have to get to that mindset where, as a teacher, I know I have the content, and that's why you are hired by the university. There's a very rigorous hiring process, a vetting process for hiring. So there's no question you have your content, but it's the delivery that's going to change. Now, that means it is really the tools that are going to change. And when you come to the classroom, it is okay to actually find a student that knows how to use Zoom, for example, a lot better than you. But that doesn't mean that you lose your content, because you're there to deliver content. It's just that the tools are new to you. And so what is happening now is the teacher is finding themselves in a position where you're actually learning while you're teaching. So when we talk about teaching and learning, it's happening in both directions. Now, for the student is realizing that my job is not to just go sit down and listen to the teacher. Is I have to also dig up information and contribute to the discussion. When I bring that meaningful contribution to the classroom, then the classroom totally changes because ideas are coming from both sides, from the students and from the teacher. Now, it can be empowering, but it also can be very intimidating for the teacher because you go out there and you're talking and you actually don't know where the discussion is going today because there is a student who read something and is going to ask you a question that you honestly don't have an answer. And that can be challenging. But the idea is you are also modeling the learning process right on your feet. And to cede that position and say, you know what, I'm in the classroom, I'm the teacher, but I am also here to learn, can be very radical in just its philosophy. All right, and that brings me to the next point, that yes, teaching is actually a team sport. You are a team with your students, you're a team with your institution who is facilitating all those things. And so everybody is basically in it together. Now, there are some necessary adjustments. Of course, we are going to adjust a lot of things because your position suddenly changed from the middle, the center of the discussion. You have actually gone into the side. And in most cases, they say it is a student-focused learning process. So the student now comes in the middle. The talking has stopped 100% from the front. The talking from the front is now down to 50% or sometimes even less. And the students are talking more. The content is no longer that one textbook, but now suddenly it's the internet. And what we are doing is we are not swallowing everything. We are basically sorting and sifting through information and figuring out what's relevant and what is not. Now, the problem also comes in, well, I really don't see a problem, but the challenge is when you remove yourself from the classroom, where you can talk and look at your students in the face, and you are put behind the internet, we know 80% of communication is verbal. So that means you're only going to use 20% of your words to accomplish the 100% of the understanding. And I think that is really the biggest challenge here, to basically make your sentence very clear. You make your procedures very easy to follow so that just your words are standalone. It's like a recipe. And sometimes when you go out there, you say, okay, the objective today is I want to accomplish this. This is the content I am going to use, and this is how I'm going to assess. Sometimes assessments in the classroom in a face-to-face environment are easy because you look at students, they look at you, and you know they don't understand, so you have to repeat. But in an online environment, you don't have that. There's a lag in time, so you have to anticipate some of those things before they actually happen. Now, something else is the oversight is a huge, huge part. And this is more administrative than anything. But I'm saying this so that we understand that in order for the system to be effective, we're going to need a very strong oversight. That means technical support. You're going into the classroom, digital classroom, and you have a problem. Now, this is 3 o'clock in the morning for me. Now, if I need help, I need to be able to get help right now because I don't have an opportunity to wait until morning when the office opens. Now, that means either I am trained or I have the resources to basically troubleshoot and take care of those things. Then there is quality control. You see, think about the old, Professor Midamba talked about the old colonial setting where the headmaster walks down the hallways to see which teacher is teaching and what the teacher is teaching. You see, that's not happening. Everybody's in their home. Some of them are doing these things at night. So the question is, how do you quality control that process? So the most schools that I have worked with, there's actually a quality control person in the background. And we tell our students that, yes, there will be these people who basically come and look to see everything is okay. So, you know, we're in a different society now. People complain about things. So when a student complains about my teaching, and sometimes I don't even know, they come in and say, okay, somebody complained about this and that, and we have gone into your classroom and we have seen this and that. So the evidence is actually all there. So it's a question of discussing and finding out what is going on. So the illustration of the headmaster walking down the corridors to listen to who's teaching and what's not, it's basically now a quality control person who is basically lacking in the internet with an eternal presence. So you have to get to the point where you realize you are not in the classroom. You're not alone in the classroom. There are other people who are doing different functions in there. And of course, feedback is a big thing. Feedback, sometimes people want to do real time and you want to hear what's going on, but the internet can be a dark space if it doesn't talk back to you. And so the facilitator now is, your job is to actually bring this learning process to life. And the way to do it is to have regular and rapid feedback. All right, this is basically the old system. The headmaster walking down the corridor, the teacher coming, pointing at things on the board. We have lectures, we have tests, we have and then we have assignments and projects. The feedback mechanism is very physical. If a student needs you, they stop you after class, or they come early, they come to your office and all that. Now, we're all used to that, so I will not talk very much about that. That's the face-to-face traditional classroom. Now, the Internet of Things is basically very new, and we are going to be inventing a lot of things. What I want us to do more than anything, more than me telling you this is the right way to do things, I want you to actually remember that solutions are going to come from very many different places. In some places are solutions that we don't even anticipate. In some places, there is a solution to a problem you didn't even recognize. You might be pulling so hard and there's something that will make things easier, but you actually didn't know or realize or take time to find out that there's a solution to some of those things. Or sometimes that issue is really a problem. So we have to be very open to suggestions and review of some of the things we do. All right, so a fully online course format has two main functions. It can be synchronous or it can be asynchronous. Right now, we're having a synchronous moment. Synchronous means everybody comes online at the same time and we have a classroom and we're interacting together. Asynchronous means you have information out there, you come in at whatever time, you have a window of maybe a day or two to do this work, or sometimes a week. And so you come in there at whatever time. You can come in at night, you can come in during the day. And what happens is when I come in as the teacher, I find out what responses have come and I respond to them, and the interaction happens passively. Then there are other things like internet infrastructure, the bandwidth, because sometimes having everybody on the internet at the same time can be a problem. And sometimes the geographic footprint. And here I mean something like, okay, we are 8 hours apart. My day is your night. So in order for us to accomplish some things, sometimes it's actually easier to go asynchronous. So within the same day, the work is done, but then we are not there exactly at the same moment. And now we're getting also non-traditional students, people who keep families during the day and maybe they get weekends and nights to do the work. So that might be another issue. Now, the course outline is going to be a lot more descriptive. Sometimes in a syllabus, we just mention a few things, a few lines, and then when you go to class, you explain everything. Now, that is not going to happen. In this case, you have to be very clear and remember that 80-20% communication. You only have that 20% moment with your words to basically explain everything. And participation is going to be very different. Participation in class used to be attendance, for example. A student comes to class and just sits there and writes notes. And so long as the student is quiet, the teacher is okay. But in an online classroom, coming and logging in and reading quietly and taking notes is not enough. You basically have to respond and contribute to the body of information in the classroom. And now in terms of assessment, this has been a really big problem. And that is because, in fact, some schools have a machinery for taking exams. teachers write exams and they put the marking scheme, they send it to a central body that administers it, and the students go into this big lecture hall and they do exams, and there are people who proctor this who are actually trained proctors. Now, you know that's going to be changed because students are taking these exams in Java in a restaurant somewhere. They're taking it at home in the bedroom. They're taking it, so we really don't know. So there are some things that we're going to be talking about also regarding assessment. And how do we monitor? We have lockdown browsers, we have cameras, and we now even, I think one of the industries that's going to start rising now is what we call the proctoring services, where you say, okay, go downtown to this building, this room number, and do your exam. So the student gets there and there's internet and there's somebody who's hired to basically log them in, put a password, the student does the exam and gets out. So I don't know how it's going to work in what format, but somehow in the process of assessment, what we are trying to do is to determine, is this the real person that's doing it? And secondly, is the person doing it in a good and fair way? So those systems will basically have to be set up. All right. Then now we go back to the bigger picture. When we are setting up the curriculum, we are looking at three things. I call this the trio. It's the same curriculum, nothing has changed. We're just changing the tools. Now, in every curriculum, there's an outcome, what you want to accomplish. There's the content, what you use to accomplish that goal. And assessment, how do you know that that goal has been met? Now, those are basic pieces and they still stay in place. The only thing is that the outcomes are probably going to stay the same. The content is going to change a little bit. It's no longer the textbook, but it's going to be some form of online internet something. Some publishers have now converted all their textbooks to digital textbooks. So when you buy, they ask you, do you want a digital copy or do you want a physical copy? And they do that. And then of course, assessment. I said about the challenge of basically writing questions and so on. And I'll give you a certain technique of how to basically change the questions to a way that the questions are more interactive and you are actually able to capture to assess the student's knowledge better. And then of course, we talk about content development, and content development, this is a huge, very big field because we have publishers who now have things online. We have common media services, internet websites. We have YouTube, and then of course we have some self-recording. And I'll say something about self-recording at some point. Then in terms of assessments, back again, we have aligning course objectives. This is the education part of me coming out. There is alignment. Alignment is a big word in education. You have an objective, you have the content that ties to that objective, and you have an assessment that ties to that. And whatever this course is supposed to feel part of the curriculum, because when you go to teach a course, most of us find a syllabus that's already written. We also know that as a teacher, you can change some things, but you can't change everything because the moment you change the content in the class, then it leaves a gap in the overall place in the curriculum that it wants to fill. Now, something I wanted to mention is somewhere we have to really revisit the philosophy behind our assessments especially. Now, sometimes you want to ask students a question in a test because you know this concept is so important and you want the students to know the answer to this question because you expect them to answer that questions after they leave your classroom. That's one reason. The other reason is you want to see just how much the students read and whether they understand the concept. And those are very different things. So sometimes you can ask a question in order to prepare students for a later event. So that's a preparatory question. It's preparing you for what's coming up. But then you can also ask a question, which is basically finding out where you are now. So when you have a preparatory question, you might ask the question, but you might also allow the student to find the answer so that they are better prepared to respond to that question in the future. So you're really forward looking. But then when you're backward looking, you're looking at, does the student know this information right now? And when the student does, they are commended, and when they are not, they're basically penalized. So sometimes the philosophy can be a little different. And when we go to online, where you're looking at a situation where sometimes it's hard to proctor the exam and you're not sure whether the student is having access to other things, you might want to also review the philosophy behind the way you ask questions. I imagine there are teachers who are familiar and probably tried open book exams. That's what open book exams are. I'm not really testing you on what you already know. I am really testing you to remind you that this thing is so important, and the next time you hear this question, you need to have a crystal clear answer. And then, of course, there are issues of access, and access now means many things. You have the material on the internet, but does the student have an instrument to which to tap into the internet? Is it a phone? Is it a computer? Is it a tablet? Because all those access the internet differently. Now, the other thing is you might have the instrument, but do you have the internet connectivity? I was very delighted when I heard that in Kenya now we have the Google Loons, where the balloons basically float around the country with internet service. And they even had a picture on the internet to show the path of the balloons. And it actually started from Nairobi, went all the way to Kitui, and floated all the way to Migori, my favorite place. So internet is actually now becoming a lot more accessible. And when we talk about access, we're looking at issues like that. Now, and then of course, I just talked about the proctored and unproctored environments. That means that even in the internet, there still are options to proctor things, especially for those, exams that are high stake, where people might feel more tempted to do that. Now, and in terms of setting up questions, we're looking at simple recall and analytical questions. And this way we are looking at basically the Bloom's taxonomy, which I'll talk about a moment. Now, sometimes you might want to actually write your questions, or sometimes you actually depend on certain mechanisms. Now there's artificial intelligence that is actually used to generate test questions. And what happens is you have a test that you give for 30 minutes. And what this system does is it will ask you questions that are progressively becoming more difficult. So if I answer the question easily, it gives me a harder question, and it gives me a harder question and progressively harder. So if I get all the questions right, it takes me up the curve very quickly. So I might answer 10 questions and get 100%. Another student comes in and answers the first questions, get it right. Second question gets it wrong. So there's wrong and right answer. So it's basically going up and going down. And the student ends up taking 20 questions and gets a lower grade. So the question here is, how is it that during a time frame of a test, one student does more questions than another, and all that grading stuff happens? So I'm just telling you this to make you aware that there are some questions out there that you can set up yourself, and there are some systems that are already made with integrated artificial intelligence to really evaluate students' capacity in different ways. All right, now, I think we are familiar with these two terms, which is basically measurement and evaluation. Now, in terms of measurement, we're looking at how much knowledge, and evaluation, we're seeing, okay, is that level of knowledge acceptable? Has it met a standard? And what administrators like to look at is evaluation. And unfortunately, or fortunately so, most of us instructors are looking at the measurement. Now we're looking at the percentage score that you got in this test and so on. But the question is, overall, what are you really measuring, or what standard has been accomplished by that student with a certain score? And we all know that some tests are more difficult than others. And for that reason, getting an 80% in one test and a 70% in another test might be the same, but the score is different. So I'm sure we understand that. All right, then we have various types of assessments, and of course the formative assessments. These are the ones that you're looking at, you know, this is more evaluation. Am I achieving the right impact? Are people understanding? Is the concept easy to understand? Is my method, is my approach effective? So you just basically put simple questions out there. It can be non-graded, it can be anonymous, or sometimes in a classroom setting, you say, hey, how many people understand this? Raise up your hands. And most of the hands go up, then you know, okay, fine, let's move on to the next concept. Now, if the hands don't come up as many, then you know you have to repeat or do something. Then, of course, we have the summative ones. These are the ones where we have a specific score, and it basically is in terms of deciding, has the standard been met or not? And this is where we sometimes have a score or a percentage, or sometimes we have a fail score, pass-fail score. All right. Now, formative assessments basically monitor learning. And of course, I know we are familiar with some of this process. And I just wanted to mention the whole idea of techniques and uses, because when it comes to techniques, you can use informal observation and so on. Now, in an online system, what you'll notice is it makes testing very easy and fast, because you can make the computer actually grade the thing for you and give you a score. So the moment the student goes in there, takes a short quiz, 5 questions, it drops you a score and you know, hey, I can now make these changes. I need to do this. Say, for example, I can ask, as soon as the students come in, you ask, do you have a computer? How much internet do you have? What? And then you look at that, you say, oh, most of my students don't have a personal computer. That means we need to change this into that and so on. So those are some things that can give you a quick assessment towards making decisions. Now, in terms of summative assessments, the accomplishment is, has learning taken place and is that satisfactory? And the benefits is that you have intervention or saying, okay, now you need to, students are doing badly in this class and most scores are really bad. Now, is the prerequisite a good thing, or should we require these students to maybe have more content, have assistance in covering the lecture material and so on? I know we have tutors. Now, with an online environment, the tutors are going to be very different. And so there are various, I have various things that we can do here. And sometimes in an online environment, you can have a passage and you tell the students to write a few sentences about what they just read. They type in. And so when you come in, you just basically look and see what kind of feedback I'm getting. And I know in an online environment like now, while I am doing this, somewhere in the background, somebody's monitoring the chat session and looking and saying, hey, this is what is happening. And that is basically the instant feedbacks that we're doing. Okay, now, so that concludes the background of some of the things that we like to do. And it brings us, okay, now we're in the classroom. How do we make engaging discussions? How do we make the discussions involve everybody and actually be informative? Now, the first thing is we know everybody participates, because if you don't participate, then you are essentially not present. So students are forced to say something. And what I tell my students is, I'm going to require you to write 100 words, and they cannot be, hey, that is a good thing, I learned a lot. No, you have to basically put in a lot more, make it substantive. And to make it substantive means you take the information that you have received and say it in your own words, and then contribute more information, and then pose a question that opens the discussion further. Now, the other thing is, as a facilitator, you might want to actually identify students in the classroom, maybe who are quiet, who just participate minimally, and so you engage them more. And sometimes you might want to point out ideas that are good, that have been brought out, that merit more discussion, and you point to those. Because when it comes to online environments, when students come in, they're basically looking, what did the teacher say? Sometimes they don't necessarily say, what did so-and-so say? And so when the teacher points at a student's discussion post, then you're basically putting focus on that, and that is the benefit of that. So the other part is that you as an instructor, you're in the classroom and you are making posts. You want to model the right post so that if a student says, oh, what is a good, how do I write a good comment? They want to be able to look at yours so that they can actually copy you. So you are basically modeling that. So these are the instructions I have in my classroom. I say, to satisfy weekly attendance requirements, students are expected to participate in discussion boards. You need 3 substantive comments spread over 2 days. In other words, you don't come on one day and do everything. The reason for that is that information changes constantly, and you want to come in there frequently. Now, the other thing is, when it comes to 3 substantive comments, you're making 3 comments. I call 1 the primary and 2 are the secondary. The primary means that you actually come in, you read the material, and then you comment about the material you have read. Once you do that, then you go in and read what other students have written and you respond to it. Those are secondary posts. Now, my system allows me to block entry into the discussion board until you have posted your initial comment. In other words, your initial comment is going to be original before you read others and comment about them. And I say, hey, I want you to do this, and I want you to 70 words for it. Okay, here is an example. This is my post, and I'm saying, referring to a person, hi, John, thanks for yours on the issue of burning trees and crop residues. Excuse me. This is a module that we were using. So I'm basically taking the information, putting the context on the information that the student previously posted. That tells you that I have actually read something before I came up with this comment. Then my comment is, first, when past residue is burnt and so on. So I'm saying, I'm adding my comment. And then I go and dig deeper and I say, trees serve as a critical carbon sink for atmospheric carbon dioxide. And, you know, when wood is sequestered, the carbon is in the trees, and when it's burnt, it basically goes out. So, hey, where do I find this information? I give you a link where you can basically read that. That means I have taken you from one point, given you knowledge, and then given you a reference to basically follow up. So that gives you a whole place where you can actually look and say, this is a model post. So when I say substantive, this is what I am looking at. And if a student does an unsubstantive post, they basically don't get the points for that day. And I use this to point out and say, hey, this is how to write one so that it can actually contribute to the discussion. All right. Now, sometimes you have groups. And I know this is an issue when you have a class of 100 students. There are some students who are not going to participate as much as you want them. And for that reason, they basically end up in a situation where you want to make the discussions. This is basically engaging students. So what I do is I basically sometimes put them in groups. Now, something I like to say is most learning management systems are able to actually do groups. And the management system I use regular is D2L. And this can be on Canvas, it can be on Blackboard and all those, and Moodle. You can actually put your students in groups. And inside the groups, they can have discussions, they can have share folders, they can even submit assignments together. Now, the reason I say groups is this. Let's say, for example, you're going to discuss a topic you have a subject, and this subject has five topics. That means you're going to discuss those 5 topics, one on Monday, another on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So every day of the week, you're going to discuss one topic. So it's going to take you a whole week to do that. Now, here is another approach. I take the class, split it into 5 groups, and I tell each group to discuss one topic, all right? So suddenly, all these topics are being covered on the first day. Now, when they cover the topics on the first day, what do we do the second day? They discuss the first day. So the second day, they spend this time compiling responses or presentations so that other people, so we discuss this aspect of our topic, we summarize it, and we present it to the rest of the class. So on day 2, we're presenting it to the rest of the class. Okay, and then after we present it to the rest of the class, that means, so now everybody has an idea of what everybody did, which is basically the breadth of the topic. But then each student actually had a chance to go in depth on the topic that they discussed in their group. That gives them depth. So in 2 days, I have accomplished something that would have taken 5 days to do. So sometimes then you can spend that extra time to basically cover up some things and cover some things that might not have been covered. All right. Now, in terms of building teams, teamwork, this can be a challenge. And I know there are people out there who have it to a science, but when you have a large group, this can be a really big problem. So sometimes people don't know how to work together and so on. There are some certain things that I want to put out here, just so that you can have some kind of guidelines to that. The first is that in building teams, sometimes you want to have compatible people. You can let people choose their own teams, and you can do all those things. So anyway, so there are various ways to do it. Sometimes I just go alphabetical. I say, hey, I have a class list. It's alphabetical by last name, and it's random. The redeeming factor here is I allow my students to reassign. That means if it doesn't work well this time, for the next project, I'll have the groups arranged as a different way. So it kind of gives you an opportunity to change things around. Now, sometimes in the group, you have to be very clear about your instructions. Sometimes give them a sample and tell them how you're going to grade them. That way then the students know how to even grade themselves so that they can be better. Because when they're in a group, there's going to be that student, and this goes later. We have a group leader, we have a scribe. So sometimes students take up different roles so that they can help each other. And when they help each other to do these things, so it does help when they know what the instructions are, because they're going to be reviewing those. You show them a sample of what is a good discussion and so on. And sometimes give them a rubric. This is what I'm going to grade you on, and this is what I need to do. Now, another thing is, even though the students are in a group, the teacher has to be present in those ways. That means you're able to get into the group and insert yourself into some of the discussions to make sure that they're still in topic and so on. Now, here are some documents I'd like to share with you. Now, in order for the group to work, sometimes people have to be accountable to each other. And this is what I call the team charter. The team charter is a document that basically identifies the group, and out there it gives you the student names, which people are in the group, their contact information, both phone and email, and it tells you what is, this is the best time to call me. Call me in the evenings or call me in the morning, and all those things. So the students list their information here. And then they tell about, what are my expectations? We expect to communicate respectively, open and honest. We want to be active in discussions. We want to submit work on time. These are our goals. This is basically how we're going to do this. I like the way Professor Gao did it. When we got into this forum, he basically put a slide up and said, okay, this is how we are going to conduct ourselves. So everybody knows now how we're going to do it and everything is clear. So we now are accountable to each other. And then how do we handle conflicts? If something is not done right, don't feel bad when I talk to you about it, because I am the group leader and that is my responsibility. And don't feel bad when we tell the teacher after you don't respond well, because what happens, this is something that we have already agreed. So to say those things early actually helps in group cohesion. That way people are not infighting and so on and saying, oh, why did you tell on me? I'm losing points and so on. Now, the next thing that I like to use is what I call the activity tracker. The activity tracker puts the names of the group members, the activities that they were assigned, and then was it completed or was it not completed? Was it timely? Was it not? And then some of the comments come here. Now, usually the team project is usually a paper. When I give them a paper, they write a paper, it's 10 pages of something, they produce it, and I want the activity tracker submitted with that. That means I can go to the activity tracker and say, oh, this thing has a lot of editorial inconsistencies. So who was responsible for that? This is the person that was responsible, and sure enough, they say they were going to do it, they only completed 50% of their work. Then that means even in a group setting, you don't all have to get the same grade. And that's what students need to know, that when I go into the group, I'm not riding on everybody's back. I also have to contribute, because if I do not contribute, then I will not get the full credit for that project, because I did not participate equitably, all right? Okay, then it identifies the people here and so on. I find this instrument very nice, because what it does is that it makes students more accountable, and it makes them more transparent in the way they do things, so that there's no student who's coming behind everybody else's back and saying, you know, the teacher, I did this work all by myself. I say, okay, what does the activity tracker say? If the activity tracker says % completed 0, 0, 0, 0 for everybody and 100% for me, then of course that is right. And of course the activity tracker is shared by the whole group, so everybody knows what everybody else did. All right. Now, in terms of online assessments, the big thing here is Bloom's taxonomy. And I like Bloom's taxonomy because it is very common. Many people are familiar with it. And so we don't have to basically reinvent the wheel. Okay. So we know Bloom's taxonomy is this pyramid that starts from the simple at the bottom and the more sophisticated at the top. And the terms are remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. And out here, we have it on the side, which basically, these bullets here basically explain what is going on here. And so it's basically a definition thing. And I'm sure you can find this. I just basically pull this online. You can find it anytime. So the point here is, when we want to have effective questions in our assessment, we want to push our questions from the bottom to from simple recall towards understanding, applying, and analyzing. You want to push your questions to the top. How do you do this? Most of us feel like, okay, that knocks out true and false. It knocks out multiple choice. That means you have to do essays. Now, if you're going to do essays, you're going to have 2 pages writing from everybody, 2 pages times 200 students, you have 400 pages to read. Maybe that is correct. But in a computer-generated system, there is probably an easier way. Now, let me just give you a quick illustration. Let's pretend this is a chemistry background. Actually, okay, this is a chemistry background. What I need you to recognize is down here, I have Bloom's taxonomy, and I have each of these questions associated with each of these levels. So as you see, the simplest question I can ask about water is, what makes water a polar molecule? That is simple recall. all right? Now, if I go to understanding, I can make that question a little more complicated and say, how does the polarity of water influence its behavior at different temperatures? So I know that the way water behaves at different temperatures depends on how that polarity works. And how does it work? Because you have to break the hydrogen bonds in order to change its different states. So it's now, do you really understand what polar molecules do in a molecule? And then as you go up, you can basically go up higher. And as you go up higher, you're really going up all the way now. And eventually at the very top in Create, you can basically tell the students to design a water-cooled internal combustion engine. Now, that sounds like a very complicated question, and that's true because they have to create. The reason I say this is if you ask a student in an online environment and you ask them a question at the bottom here, they can basically look at their phone, they can look at it in half a second and give you an answer. But if you're going up this way, it is a lot more difficult for the student to basically cheat their way around and come with a really good answer. They have to have prior information in order to build it, especially in a time-controlled environment. Now, I have this as a science example, and I have this as an ecological example, and it basically does the same thing. Here, I have students look at a video, which is on Story Maps, ArcGIS, Professor Gao. And then after that, I have, I'm teaching students how to use a stakeholder matrix. Now, the stakeholder matrix is basically a system of assessing issues and basically how to come up with solutions in the ecosystem. So the simplest question I can ask is, who is a stakeholder or what is a stakeholder? The student can basically look at a sentence and write it very quickly. A stakeholder is somebody who has interest in whatever is going on. Well, that's a stakeholder. That's a simple question. Now you can make it more involving and you say, okay, what are the components of a stakeholder matrix? What does a stakeholder matrix involve? Oh, yeah, it's a grid. You have something on the x-axis, you have something on the y-axis. So the student has to remember that. So you can go all the way up and eventually in Create, you're telling students, here is a problem and I want you to use a stakeholder matrix to basically process this solution. So you're really creating a solution out of understanding the problem using this tool. So it's a lot more involved. And the reason I'm going through all this is I'm saying is when you go into an online format, sometimes you want to change the way you ask questions so that you can still assess students' information and they are not basically copying and pasting to give you answers. All right. Now, this is multiple choice. Now, multiple choice, I brought it in. I like multiple choice, and I know that's not a popular way. People don't believe in it a lot, but that's okay. The reason I like multiple choice is that you can tell the computer what the right answer is and the computer will grade it for you. So that cuts down a lot of work. It takes a lot of time to set it up, but then after you set it up, everything is automated from that. So all you do is look at how they have performed and you try to intervene in the process. And the reason here is if you're taking time teaching, giving the students the material, writing the questions, you're taking time grading the questions, that's time away from actually responding and doing intervention activities in the classroom. So if the computer can actually do this for you, then it frees some time for you to actually be more active in the classroom. So here is a question. And typically, this is what we do. Now, I borrowed this from Dr. Richardson, and Dr. Richardson is a colleague of mine, and we basically had an instrument we like to use, and we decided to basically go in and use the Bloom's taxonomy to drive it and actually convert this instrument into a multiple choice system that we can automate in the process, all right? So we came here and we decided, okay, we're going to ask a question, but we don't want the questions to be simple recall. We want them to be basically drive them up the Bloom's taxonomy. So we went out here and decided, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to give up a scenario. So you look at the scenario and you identify the problem. And then we will now ask you questions based on that scenario and see whether you can answer or whether you understand and can apply some of these items that are mentioned in the scenario. So the scenario goes is Kylie looks into a microscope and sees an animal cell. And after the cell was treated with an unknown compound, something strange happened. The organelles started looking like they were floating around. They are not restricted in space. Oh, okay. So the student has to know the characteristics of a cell, what the cell organelles are made of, and their location in a normal cell. So the first question here is, what type of molecule was likely broken down during the treatment? In other words, there's a molecule in that unknown compound, and this molecule did something to another molecule inside the cell. So this is basically a question that's looking at detergents. What do they do? And this COVID time, this is a very relevant question. So basically, when you use soap, it dissolves phospholipids, and the phospholipids is what form the plasma membrane. And when the plasma membrane leaves, everything floats around. So the student has to understand that in order to figure out that the correct answer is B. So, and I have a few other examples. So in this case, I am using one scenario and I have 5 questions on the same scenario. So I'm really asking you a question about basic chemistry. What molecules make the different parts of the cell? And I can ask you in simple recall, I can say, okay, what are the basic molecules that make up a cell? You say they are phospholipid, they are proteins, there is the cell wall, which are calcium. Okay, fine. But then when I do them in this way, the student actually has to engage with the material a lot more intimately and understand it in order to come up with an answer. So I have examples of that. And of course, somewhere in there, I also have interactive tools. Interactive tools are, I have given examples here, and these examples are of actually labs. For those people in the science background, they actually have lab activities that you can actually have there, especially like visible body. You go online and it's basically a digital electronic body. It has a leg, a human leg, for example, and it tells you peel off the skin. So you click on the skin and you drag it out and it pulls out the skin. And of course, under the skin, you start seeing connective tissue or muscles. And then it asks you, okay, show me the erector longus. So you click on this and you click on it. If it's the right answer, it says correct. If it's the wrong answer, of course, it says no. So you can even examine students using that. It's a really good system that they have. Now, some of this, like Labster, they are experiments which it gives you, just like students who would do in a lab. You go there and you get instructions and they say, okay, here are some instructions of how to do a titration. And you basically titrate and it gives you data and you process the data and you actually calculate and you have lab results. The difference is that the only difference between that and a classroom is that you don't get the wet surface, you don't use the instruments themselves, but the process is actually identical and you can actually come up with the same data that you do in an actual lab. So while it has its deficiencies, there are very big attempts to actually mimic that same process. Now, then we have the PET systems. Now, this is actually, I picked it out of the University of Colorado. And what this one does, it basically shows you a real person. This person is doing this and is doing that, and they're telling you what they are doing. And then at the end, you have a worksheet where you actually fill in information and do that. So from the teaching end is you give the students that module, they basically work through it, and they come up with a lab report, and you can actually assess it just the same way you used to assess the real-time classroom to see whether the students have understood the topic. So in summary, these are some of the things that we've been talking about. Now, we're not only teachers, but we finally have started learning. Everybody is a learner in this new environment. And we find out that online learning is more interactive, it is student-centered, it emphasizes critical thinking, and we need a modified pedagogy. We have to start looking at things differently. Now, in the larger context, online learning is here to stay. It is growing, and it has forced us to basically develop our skills into that. Exams will take a different meaning and different formats, of course. Attendance will be different. We are redefining the word classroom. And something else, and this is my last piece of advice, is that sometimes it is very intimidating. Actually, I think it's intimidating all the time to do something for the first time, especially in front of others. We've always been the experts, and this time we are going to be challenged in a lot of ways. So what I like to encourage all of you is go and register for an online class. There are several free online classes. Pick one that is free, first of all, that way you're not spending money. Pick one that is in an area that interests you. And if nothing else, you go in there, take the class just to see how it is organized, so you can actually experience the classroom, the digital classroom environment. Because when you come into the classroom, you are more likely to model the things that you learned in the classroom where you were. And we know that our teachers influence us a lot, and that is another way that you can actually do that in order for you to basically become more proficient. I know this is just the tip of the iceberg. At least I think I have given you an idea of the scope of things and what are some of the pointers and directions in which you want to go. And this basically opens us up for discussion. And this is probably my favorite place, Professor Ogao.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you very much for that delivery. It's a timely thing. We are looking at online pedagogy, and you've placed it within a very good context, the COVID, so really kind of a crisis. You've mentioned a number of things. One, our preparedness from an institutional level, and then also at an individual level. Of course, you might have gotten this from Professor Bagaka. We've been trying to look at it from an institutional level. We've had quite a number of trainings, but I like that what you ended up with, the challenge you've passed over to us to really try to enroll in some of this online training. I think there's a lot to learn from that. And you've also, you've reminded us on what it takes to come up with a good curriculum. In this case, of course, putting it in the context of online learning, and how to engage with students. I think that is good. And again, assessments. Actually, assessment is one of the training we had a few weeks ago. We did our online assessments. It's just ending this coming week. And again, it was good that you've reviewed some of those ideas. So thank you very much for giving us that, what I would call a good bird's eye view of what we are actually being confronted with. So now it's a Q&A, and I'll go to the attendees, the audience, please. I don't see any of you posting questions, so I might have to do it live. So if you have a question, you can raise up your hand, and then I can maybe let you talk.
I see one question here.
Okay.
The question is, what's a team scribe in the activity tracker?
Okay, yes, please. Prof, maybe you can straight away go to that, yeah.
Yes, a team scribe is basically the secretary, the group secretary. The team scribe is the one that puts all the documents together and compiles everything and makes sure all the pieces are there so that they are responsible for the secretarial work. The document is prepared, it is submitted, basically, doing the logistics of putting paperwork together.
Good. Anybody with the hands up? Let me see. There's Mtia. I'm allowing you to talk. I can see your hand is up. Mtia, are you there? Mtia? Okay.
Hello.
Yes. Okay. Yes, Justice.
Yes, I'm following. Sorry, I think I activated the hands up accidentally, but I'm following.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. Okay, I can see other questions coming in. So this is from Nyaribo. From the presentations, online learning is more interactive and engaging. So Prof, you're being asked to, will the facilitator be effective by having many students? So I think what Dr. Nyaribo is asking is, what's the impact of online learning, say, to a large group of students? Because it's meant to be interactive and engaging.
Yes.
So we have these big classes.
Yes. So we have, I think one of the challenges is that the classrooms are big. And that is no question going to be a big issue. Now, when you have a large classroom, it's going to be difficult to basically manage the process. But one thing I like to mention is I did say something about groups. And when you put groups, when people are in a smaller groups, it's more intimate and they tend to participate a lot better. And that is one way to do it, so that everybody has accountability to somebody else that's closer. Now, the other way I like to do is, I mentioned the whole idea of automating exams. When you automate exams, you also allow for some of that work to be removed from your plate. When you have less work trying to grade, basically you are getting help. The computer is helping you so that you can free your time to now do things that are more engaging, like working with students, answering student questions. If you have 100 students and there are 100 comments coming out every, let's say students are supposed to participate 3 times and you have 100, those are 300 comments you have to read. That's a lot. So if you have to add on top of that grading and you have to add something else on top of that, that can quickly become a lot. So the idea is to outsource those things that you can and focus on those things that you really cannot outsource. I hope that answers the question.
Okay. Thank you. Prof, there's another question from Michael Njogu. He's asking if you can elaborate a little bit on, we have mathematical units. I know you gave an example of, when you're talking about those interactive tools, you gave some tools that can help you do simulations, the virtual labs. So his question is more on mathematical units. How can they be facilitated in real time?
There's nothing I like more than, finding out what's already there, because we do not have to invent all these things. I know sometimes you want to spend time, like I've noticed some basically put a camera and record themselves and do something on the wall. And I'll mention something about that in a minute. But there are systems out there that are already been created. It's funny, my children have been, of course, going to school at home. And I noticed in elementary school, they have math programs that are actually very elaborate, and they actually teach you to work through the problem with the different steps. So there are systems out there that you can look at, and they start all the way from elementary to huge statistical postgraduate stuff. So there are things that I can't really tell you something offhand, but I do know that even in math, especially in problem solving, there are some systems that are more interactive, and this is where artificial intelligence comes in. Now, having said that, there are systems out there that you just need to explore and find out which one works for you. The other thing I want to say is we always have the temptation of recording and putting it online. That's okay, but think about it this way. If I record myself teaching something and writing on the board, I have a camera there. The fact that, first of all, I don't have a cameraman, that means the lighting, the sound is going to change over time, and that's not necessarily going to be ideal. And when we start talking about accessibility, some of these issues are that in order for everything that you put out there to be accessible, it has to allow for visually impairment, audio impairment, and so on. You have to have things like lighting, you have to do sound, you have to have closed captioning. Now, if you're not going to invest on all that, then the quality of your production that you have put out there actually goes at the bottom of the line. In other words, it's non-compliant when you start with. And so my suggestion to you is there's probably a video out there on YouTube, a publisher somewhere who has professionally produced the same concept you're trying to explain. So the best thing is give the students a link, let them go watch it, ask them questions and so on. And I think you actually accomplish a lot more instead of spending half the day trying to record yourself and to try to transcribe something that you've already done.
Thank you, Prof. Prof, there's one of my favorite authors, the late Christensen Clayton. I think he passed on early this year. He came up with this idea of the theory of disruptive innovation. And I think the idea behind it is that there needs to be a change in the entire educational process, kind of an overhaul. It's long overdue of the educational process. And he did mention, he talked about things like the open educational resources, the OERs, the MOOCs, do you think this is the time? This is just from your instincts, what you're seeing happening. Do you think this pandemic is going to redefine the future of the educational process? Looking at it from, the US, a global picture of it. What do you think?
Like I said, I believe COVID, historically, we will look back and say COVID changed everything. This was a milestone. The reason is that everybody is faced with the same problem, and it's and innovation is coming from all over the place. I think what people have now also realized is that it used to be that when something happens, we look at Europe, we look at the US for solutions. Right now, the problem is actually in Europe and it's in the US. And people will have to basically come with indigenous solutions to some of these things. The reason that this is critical is that now we no longer have centralized centers. We don't have centers of influence, but we have basically a proliferation of influence from all over the place. So we have to start looking elsewhere, and the solutions are coming from all over the place. I mean, talk about testing. South Korea came up with the best model. China has come up with a really good way of testing. I mean, they test people in Wuhan, 11 million people in, was it a few days? And this is something that we are struggling with in Europe, in the US. So we are realizing that information is not in one powerhouse. It's all over the place. Now, there are some people who actually have the resources and actually have taken time to democratize some of these processes. We have the digital commons. You go online and you can find any information out there that you want. And it is actually not copyright protected, but it's actually out there for you to use freely. Now, that means information is now accessible. For those people that basically have internet, you can access it and freely use it. In fact, some schools now, the wealthy schools, Harvard, you can take a class in Harvard for free online. Well, the thing is, if you want a certificate for it, you have to pay. And in fact, now that changes the whole model. The question is, when you go to a school and actually pay money, what are you really paying for? Harvard is telling you you're paying for the paper because the information is already out there and we can actually give it to you. But if you want a paper to demonstrate that you've actually done it, then you will have to pay. So I think that has changed the way we look at education. It has changed the way we look at certain very fundamental things.
Okay. Thank you very much, Prof. Now, there's a question from Dr. Njuguna. He's asking, can you comment on please comment more on lockdown browsers for monitoring student participation?
Okay. The lockdown browser was basically invented for those teachers that want to give an exam and you feel like the stakes will be high and the student will feel like they have to cheat and use a book or something. So what the lockdown browser, there are two levels. The first level is when the student clicks on the exam. It has a software that locks all the applications on the computer down. So there's this miracle of Windows. I can be in one window and open another window and I'm doing 3-4 things at the same time. So if I'm doing a test on chapter 5, I open my notes on chapter 5 in another window. I look at a question, I look at the answer, I basically clip and paste it. Now, to avoid that, it locks down. So the only thing working in the test is, in the computer is that one test. And you can actually release one question at a time. So once that happens, it basically locks up the computer. Now, the other level of the lockdown browser is the monitoring system. It basically tells you that you have to use your camera and the camera comes on while you're taking the exam. And the first thing it does is it tells you to scan the room, and you scan the room and the camera sees the room in which you are. You shut the door and you turn on the mic and you turn on the camera is on, the mic is on, and you are working. So literally, the computer is watching you from that close distance while you're taking your test. And you can see the movement of the eyes of the students. It's recording. So you can actually go back and look. So students feel like there's somebody watching me and this person is actually right here, 2 feet away from me. So that kind of intimidates people and stops them from doing some of those things. So these are just some attempts to basically proctor the exam remotely.
Okay. I think that one comes close to what Dr. Bunyasi is asking also, because our question was, how do I ensure students have submitted their own work and not work done by commercial aids or for assessment? Of course, the scenario you gave was a timed, say, assessment. Yes. But assuming you have these takeaways where you're given 6 hours to work on something and then submit, there's been this proliferation of these subcontracting your work to the smart guys who do it for you and then you submit. How do you control that?
Now, of course, people who really invest in cheating, they're always a step ahead. But the thing I can think of right now is this, there are systems like Turnitin is one popular one, where every every assignment that is submitted into the Dropbox is actually scanned for plagiarism. And when you look at the assignments when they come in, it gives you the time the assignment was submitted, and it also gives you a score of an index score to tell you how much similarity or difference does it have with other things out there in the internet. And it will basically, you click on it and it tells you, it will take you to where that thing is. So it literally scans the internet and tells you this work could have come from here, could have come from here, and you actually have a way to look at it. And so sometimes as a teacher, you might say, if your plagiarism index is 30% and up, I'm going to track it and follow up and find out, because some of it are honest mistakes. Students don't know how to cite and so on, but some of it is just plain stealing, you know? Now, some universities have even become more creative, and what they've done is it not only scans the internet, but it also scans the school database to see what other students have submitted in the school. Because, you know, if I'm taking Professor Ogao's class and I ask somebody who took the class before, I say, hey, what paper did you write? Oh, here it is. They give me a copy. I just basically submit it for his class. It will basically scan all the papers that have been submitted at KCA University and see whether it's similar to anything that has been submitted in the past. So there are some effective systems to at least stop the easy, you know, so a student has to really invest in a mechanism to bypass some of these things.
I know this one is a recurring one. I think you've tackled it, but maybe you have something to say, because the practical units, we talked about quantitative units, mathematical units. There's also computer programming. I think there's a concert here, and I can see another one on film technology. These are very practical units, and somebody is interested to know how you can handle such course units. I know you partly, maybe just briefly say something on that.
My off-the-cuff response to that is to personalize things. Say, for example, if you, let's say it's in film, and you tell students, this is a filming technique that I want you to use. You can basically say, okay, I want you to use this filming technique to do this and that and that. So you kind of customize the components of that film to where if the student goes and gets somebody's film, it's very unlikely that it has those three components with it. It might have one, but not the other two, or it might have two, but not the third one. I don't know if that makes sense, but you customize the response so much that the student actually has to do something, and they can't just import wholesale and submit to you. Now, for example, I showed you the example of the Umatilla River for conservation. I give the students that exercise, and every semester I put in a different twist. I say, okay, on question number 5, when you do this, I want you to also compare it with another example in another place that we talked about in class. Cool. But that does two things. First of all, you have to have been in class and completed that assignment in order to get it right. And then secondly, if you did submit work from a previous class, it did not have that component, so you will not get 100%. So sometimes you can customize it, so make it so specific that the student actually has to do it. Sometimes the specificity might not be the same for every student. Say, for example, you have a progressive assignment. You have assignment 1, 2, 3, 4, and they're basically all sequential. And then you give students assignment 4, and you tell them to relate it to assignment 1, which was a personal something. So that means every student in the class is going to have a very personal product that does not resemble anybody else's. So in that sense, students have to physically do something. Even if you have somebody else do it for you, at least they will have to customize it with your first assignment. So it makes it a lot more difficult to do that. I don't say it is 100% foolproof, but at least it helps us get closer.
Okay. I think there's something you mentioned at the end of your presentation, again, to the challenge, because there's what we call pervasive learning, basically learning at the speed of need. That's what we are confronted with here. So many questions here, but I think it comes back to us to really look out and say, okay, how do I handle this? So I think that's a good one. Now, some quick ones from the audience again. One is from where you stand and your knowledge, what's the percentage of people globally who are engaged on online learning in university? Do you have a figure on that?
No. I don't have a figure, but there has been a lot of numbers thrown around. Now, the interesting part is that the whole definition is also very tricky, because what some are doing is, and I'll say this for the reason that some of us feel like, oh, we are in Kenya, these Kenyan systems are not, people in the US, in Europe, they are so much advanced and they are better. But I'll tell you, when school closed for my children, it was very sudden and it caught them by surprise. Now, tertiary education people are a little better, but at those levels, they hadn't prepared to do it online. So what they basically did is they took the class worksheet on PDF and put it online. Now, you could not feed in the answers. You literally had to print everything and write and scan it and send it back to the teacher. So of course that wasn't online. So, I don't call that e-learning. That basically taking the physical book and it's like emailing the book. So it really didn't, but now they are becoming a lot better. So based on that, I think the numbers are actually a lot smaller than you actually see, because the truly interactive systems that are designed for online are very few. And like I said, the pedagogy has to also change. Some of us are doing the same thing we do in class, just online. Let's say, for example, I'm recording my lectures and put them online, and as far as I'm concerned, I have done everything. That's not correct, because that's really a face-to-face pedagogy trying to be translated onto an online format. You have to change some of that.
Okay. Another figure required from you, this is Jogu again, is there an optimal online class size from your experience? What is the optimal online class size?
Oh, well, I think in many systems, they are talking about numbers. And, this also has a lot to do with where you are. I think in the US, they are capping it somewhere in the 20s. And of course, that is not going to fly in Kenya, where you have a class of 600 to start with. But I think the key here, though, is that COVID is going to change all this. You see, previously in online systems, students went there by choice. And you went in, they gave you a class of 20 students and they capped it at 20. If the students wanted more, they basically went to another section and another teacher. And I think we have to also recognize that administratively, most people who teach online before COVID were all part-timers. You pay them very little to teach a class of 20, which was economically working okay. But now you're taking a full-time person with benefits and all those things and allowances and telling them to teach an online class. So essentially what will have to happen is they will have to increase the class size to support that kind of pay, or basically ask students to pay more. And there is no student who's going to pay more to go to KCA when you can get the same degree for a small fraction of money going to another school. So I think that is something we have to be aware of, even as teachers, that we're going to always push to have a smaller class size. But economically, that model of online teaching was actually based on part-time teaching and not full-time teaching. So that is going to change a lot of that. Now, the other thing is to allow, some of the things we could do to allow is to basically increase our technical support services, increase our automation systems so that essentially we can accommodate more students more efficiently. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. A few more just towards the end. Milka and Priscilla. Milka is concerned about cultivating a positive attitude from the students' side, given that they're used to face-to-face learning. And then maybe combine that with with Priscilla's question on, we have topics that are interesting and there are some topics that are not very interesting, and it's so easy to lose students' attention during engagement. So maybe positive attitude and cultivating that interest and attention.
What I found out is most students will react differently when they know you personally. So you'll notice in online environments, people try to make it personal. You introduce yourself. Some people actually have videos of themselves. There are pictures of themselves so that you can put the person behind this. It's not just a digital thing. There's a person behind it and this person actually cares. Now, in our training, we are always encouraged to refer to people by name and refer to people very personally. Say, for example, we have, when students come into the class, they introduce themselves, say something personal about themselves. And what I do now is I go there and also say some comment about something personal about you. So somewhere in their mind, they have a feeling like, oh, this teacher actually knows me. You know, they know something. So when you personalize things become, the environment becomes more cordial, you know. Now, the other thing about engagement and passion is that, and you say, you use the term, but I usually call it economics. You want to put the least and get the most out of it. And so you tell a student, here is what I need you to do for the class. They put in the bare minimum. So sometimes you can actually give extra points for, say, for example, I require you to make 3 posts. If you have 4 posts or 5 for that week, what I will do, I might give you an extra point here or there. So students are actually motivated to do more. That is one part. The other part is that I want to also make things applied in a way that it is within their context. Say, for example, there's something in the news and it's drumming in everybody's news. I basically try to find a way that it relates to the course and then try to bring it in because you know it's in their mind. There's no doubt about it. In fact, while they are doing the class, the other window is in the news watching that item. So if you infuse that into the class discussion, sometimes it might actually help create that engagement.
Okay. There's one from Ojuan. Flip that the other way around. What's the greatest, one common mistake instructors make that we should avoid right from the beginning when it comes to online engagement? One, or rather, common mistake that...
Common, let me go back to something I said, the whole trio thing. Learning, outcomes, content, assessment. I think the fundamentals are the same. So just because we are online doesn't mean we forget about our previous standards. So sometimes we go online and the thing is carrying on and you're so busy, and then the end of semester reaches and you need the grades and somehow we have to back end a lot of work. So to keep track of the basics can be quite a challenge because sometimes it's a new environment. There are too many balls spinning at the same time. And sometimes we lose track. and then it's hard to recreate. So you have to basically start from the beginning and plan and anticipate everything in order to not to lose some of that. So I think my both things are that sometimes we might have a tendency of, basically we have to know what to preserve and what not to preserve in our transition. We can't just lecture. We can't just lecture the same way. Neither can we forget about all those assessment things that we used to do. Now, the other thing is we need to realize that now monitoring becomes a very sensitive issue, because I don't know how solid your systems are. Now we have to realize I could go to class and talk to my students and speak very loosely about certain things, especially when it comes to culture, religion, politics, sports. We could throw illustrations very easy and people will just laugh about it and life will go on. But when it's online, you might say something and find it on YouTube tomorrow. So you have to be very careful about that. So I think just the discretion that we need in the transition can be very challenging.
Okay, thank you. Let me just, Professor Magaka, are you there? Prof. Magaka? Okay, I can see him there, but he's muted. I think there are some questions which I wanted to direct to him. But meanwhile, can you comment on this attendance thing? This is a question from our academic registrar, and she's asking, how can you effectively manage the issue of class attendance of students such that they are able to meet the required contact hours in the trimester?
Okay. I think that is probably one of the best streamlined systems that we have. And the way this happens is every week there is the component of attendance, and attendance is equal to participation in an online system. In other words, if you log in and don't comment, you are as good as absent. So what happens is when a student is told that I have to make 3 posts, which is equal to full attendance for the week, then the student comes in and makes 3 posts, and the teacher decides whether they are substantive or not. If they are not substantive, that means the student did not participate enough and therefore doesn't get the full credit for attendance. And now the way I say it is, if you're required to do 3 and you're not sure that all 3 are substantive, that means you need to do 5, so that if you lose 2, you still have a full attendance. That's the easiest way I can think of, so that the system automatically tallies. So when I have a discussion exercise for each week, the attendance registrar can basically look at the discussion posts and see whether the students has been posting discussions as we speak. And if it's full attendance, that student is present. If they are not, then they are not present. But it's the teachers, I think, responsibility. Well, there's teachers and student. The student needs to know that putting 2 sentences that are not substantive is equal to absent. And then now the teacher needs to tell them, this is what a good post looks like, so that the student can actually make sure that they fully understand how to make themselves present. Otherwise, when it works that way between the teacher and the student, then the registrar has no problem.
Well, thank you very much, Prof. We have quite a number of, I can see there are people posting their questions on the chat, and I think because of time, what we can do, Prof, is we look at them and then send them to you. You can give a response, and then we can share it with the entire audience. Unless you'd want to, I know it's, we've taken your night basically. And,
actually,
I don't
what
want
happened?
Yeah.
No, what happened is I slept before, so I'm ready for my day, and there's 2 hours before sun up. Actually, it's an hour and about an hour before sun up. So what I
Okay.
can do is I don't know if you're going to close it, but I can respond to some.
Okay, okay.
I can
If you
respond
have
to
the time,
some.
that is okay.
Yes, I can type. I mean, I still have time, maybe an hour and a half. So
Okay.
I can respond to some and then, you know, see how far we can go.
Okay, okay, okay.
Yeah, if you have to,
I think,
I know, I noticed the participants are also dropping, but at least I know I do have some time. So.
Okay, okay. I think, I know there are certain activities that should be going on in parallel, and if you can respond by just typing the answer, that would be okay. I'm not going to end the session yet, so those who can wait, maybe that is fine, but I think it's good to just...
No,
do you want to answer them live, Prof?
Yes, I think it might be easier because you see that way, then you are able to merge some that look the same. You can do that for me. Because I haven't been monitoring.
Okay, so let me just, there's one that I wanted Professor Bagaka to respond to, but it's on, because it's a question on the regulatory authority. Do they recognize this approach of engagement? And in this case, we're talking about the Commission for University Education. So I thought maybe, given that you're away from Kenya, maybe do you have something to say on that?
I think I do.
Okay.
You know, this is actually a very interesting time. And the reason I say that, I look at it more of an opportunity than anything. You know, the reality is that everybody is online. Everybody that's doing anything is online. So whether you are accredited or not accredited, it doesn't matter right now. Every school is online and the commission cannot do anything about it. To start with, they don't even have the requirements of actually having an online program. So the reason I say this is because if you have the capacity to do something, this is when you can actually go into the field and practice and see whether you can play. Because really, what is happening is that the stadium is open, the field is open, you can go in there and kick the ball and see how well you can kick it. When the commission comes up with the standards, then they can decide, hey, you get out of the field, we have better players. So the funny thing is that some of the people who might end up playing the best and staying in the team are people who are not in the field right now. So if KCA comes out and sets up a really competitive system, they are basically running as the same as anybody else in the world. And that's because the floodgates got open. There's no, the commission will be happy you're actually keeping students somewhere in class, keeping them engaged. But they don't, I don't know if they can tell you to stop right now because that's the only way you have.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Another one is on engagement again. When you're in class, is it good to have your, you know, like now I'm seeing you live, Prof, but
Yes.
you know, you can put your profile picture there instead.
Yes.
Is that recommended? So there's that question also popping up here.
You know, I've actually, in the different environments I've been in, it's very different. There are some people who actually insist on a picture. There are others who insist on a video, you know, different schools. They say, oh, you need to have an introductory video so that people can see you. Now, there are certain environments, especially for some of us who live out here, where your name already looks strange. And when students come to a class and they see the name is strange and they look at the face is even strange, they already label you. So in some systems, they actually do not require you to do it because they do know that we have inherent bias about the appearance of the person that's on there. So I think it depends on the environment. What I like to do is, you know, I'm like, you know, I've been teaching for a while. And so I feel like I need to have autonomy to decide how to do it. And I think as an institution, that might be something that is to be discussed to figure out what are the acceptable patterns that we need to have. You know, I know there are some schools that say, if you're going to have your picture out there, you need to have school regalia, something to show about the school, your school pride. You need to have a logo or something. And, you know, in fact, in my school, the backgrounds they actually have institutional backgrounds that you need to have on there. So, I mean, I do this because this is the sunset I like to look at from my house. So I like to have that. But, you know, I'm just saying that to say that there's a lot that goes into that. Sometimes it can be a good thing, sometimes it might not. And to require people to go one way might, at least some discussion needs to be done on that before that decision is made.
Okay. Paris has a question. Paris Waribu, she teaches law, and she has discovered that there are very few video resources online on the Kenyan law. Therefore, it's quite a handle, especially when one has to teach technical topics. She has had to do a video in some cases to achieve that. So she's asking for your advice on this. I think the issue is that there are very few resources available online. So it takes that initiative. They have to do it themselves. And yeah, what's your take on that?
I have a colleague who felt that she had a similar problem. And what she did is she basically took some time and talked. She happened to have a friend that was good in videography who went and basically did few pieces of that. And what she did, she actually put them on YouTube. And she put them on YouTube and she accessed them from the classroom onto the YouTube. And what happened now is they're actually becoming quite popular. I mean, they're getting into, 2,000 and 3,000 hits, which is actually an opportunity. And the reason I say that is when you go out there and can't find something, maybe it's telling you it's time for you to actually be the movement that you want. So it could be actually an opportunity for you to create it and put it out there. Now, you see, if you embed it in the classroom, then it's only for your class, for your students. But if you put it out there on YouTube, for example, then that means other people will access it. You'll get the critique that it needs and you see how to improve. Because, if it's popular, people like it, then you are really responding to a need. If it's not, it's only your students who go there, then hey, something like that. And maybe that might challenge somebody else who probably has a better product to basically feel, oh, so-and-so did this, I can do better than that, and basically put it out there. And now with the YouTube generation, there are a lot of opportunities that come up. So it's, to me, a bad thing, but it also could present an opportunity.
Ramaina is asking, from the African perspective, given that most students in Africa complete high school without knowledge of computer, where do you think we have to start from? I mean, as universities, because this is a situation where they're joining the universities without well-grounded skills in computing.
Well, I think we have a real challenge. The real challenge here is that we are not digitized and we don't necessarily have the bandwidth that we need. And the problem is actually more complicated because what happens is I was working with an institution out in Nigeria, and what they basically decided, after a while, we were able to say, okay, when the students come in, they have a computer fee, they call it a network fee or something. And basically the network fee can wholesale buy some bandwidth so that the student comes in and registers and they already have an automatic bandwidth that they can use, so much data they can use for the semester. The other thing is when you look at, some schools can price compare pretty well. If your school fees is high, then it's easier to tuck in a fee for, say, a tablet or a computer, and you buy it wholesale, and a student comes in and buys one, and if they come in as a first year and buy one, they probably don't need another one until they graduate. So if that cost is tucked in at the front, or maybe an annualized so that every year they pay for it over 4 years, it actually becomes quite affordable. Now, the thing that we have realized now is when the students are dispersed and have to leave, some of them go to internet deserts. Back home, they don't have electricity, don't have internet, don't have that. So now we go back to, yes, they have the gadget, but how do they still access? And I was actually monitoring some of the universities in Kenya. What they are now doing is they are partnering with Safaricom and Telcom and all those other people to actually have institutional bundles. So the school buys, and then they give it to their students at a discount. And then some students who already have internet at home are actually able to donate to students that don't have it so that they can share. So I think this pressure has created some creative ways of making that available.
Two more. One is in the context with students on, so you have two groups of students. There are those who are interested in paper certificates, and then you have a group of students who are interested in the knowledge and skill. Is it possible to filter and handle in separate groups? I think the person is asking is anonymous, but you have two groups. One, they're just interested in the paper, the others really want to get the knowledge. What's your experience on this? Is there a way to separate this and deal with them differently?
Actually, surprisingly, I'm taking a course in cartography right now. And yes, by ESRI. Now, interesting is that in the course, they have, these are the basic things you should do. And then in each of those exercises, they have what they call the challenge. It's an optional exercise that you can actually take. So you do the basic requirement. And then if you want to take up the challenge, you take up the challenge. And of course you do this. And what they do to highlight the challenge is that the people who do the challenge thing, it's usually something that you can demonstrate to others. So they have a place where they take all those people that have taken the challenge and have done this extra step of doing this illustrious exercise. They put them in a place where other students can come and look and say, wow, this is nice, this is nice. And that is usually very rewarding for students who take the extra time to do it, when they see other people actually admiring what they do. So that's another way to basically distinguish them, because you don't want to penalize somebody for not being enthusiastic about the class because you have a requirement. But then you can give, basically, instead of giving a stick, you can give a carrot so that the other people who want to go ahead can go ahead and actually be seen and recognized.
Mm-hmm. Good. The last two questions, I think they can more or less the same, because it's about one from Ojuang. Any idea of a university that we can benchmark on in the world? Any university you think we can benchmark with in regards to what we are talking about? And then combine it with Lusak's question on, could you please share some of the most reliable free online platforms we can enroll to for the purposes of bettering our skills? Yeah.
Benchmark. benchmark, that can be, I think what has happened, there are two traditional ways that this has happened. We have universities that started online. University of Phoenix, Walden, these ones have been known, they have been on it for a while. In fact, they hardly have a physical presence. Most of their presence is online. And then we have institutions that started brick and mortar, and then they decided to start online programs. So they basically are institutions that are going in different directions. And then we have institutions that are, are right now trying to figure out how to get in because they've been thrown into this and they have no choice. Now, I don't necessarily, I've actually been in both. Like I said, for the last 10 years, I've taught at the University of Phoenix. And I noticed there are a lot of differences between that and my school at Oakwood University started doing summer classes fully online, probably for the last 5 or 6 years. We haven't had any students coming to school in the summer. They all attend summer classes online. So, that's an example of an institution going the other direction. So, I mean, the examples are many. And I have to admit that as you go through, you find some good things here and some things that are, better somewhere else. But what I think will be most valuable right now is for institutions to actually realize that we are not in a competition. We can actually do things together. So KCA decides, okay, which other school seems compatible with us that we can actually leverage with? And then you team tag together and you actually work together. Because I think because of the huge need that is so sudden, it's going to take a long time to train enough people to actually go and do technical backup support, infrastructure building, and so on. So I think it just might work better to find maybe somebody that is a little ahead of you in some things, and of course, maybe not in others, and you basically partner together and see what you can do. I do believe that, there are people who, move between institutions often, and they are able to do that. And I think, to me, what this situation has taught us is that the solutions are not necessarily with the traditional leaders. The leadership might actually be offered by very innovative, smaller institutions who are basically tackling things within their context. That might be a lot more effective than trying to pick up somebody else's model that is not necessarily has the same parameters as you do. Now, in terms of online classes, well, it really depends on the area you're in. What I would say is that each discipline has a leader in its area, and there is going to definitely be somebody online doing it. I know people like the Harvards and the Stanfords decided, oh, we have enough money to actually do these things. And I think, to me, what they've done is, if you want to learn from somebody that is well-resourced. So if you want to take a class, go take a class from people who have all the resources to actually do it. Like I said, I'm taking an online class. We at the ESRI, those are basically geospatial mapping institution. And it's basically the global recognized in the industry. And they get their best to do it. And so when I'm in there, I'm not only trying to look at the content and learn a new skill, I'm also looking at how do they do their facilitation? How do they do their videos? How do they do this? How do they, so you're out there actually looking that. And I think the best thing is to look at the best examples. And it might change depending on your discipline. And I'm sure if you decide it is law, you're going to find the best law school in the world, and it is going to have an online class, and it's probably for free. I think I lost your sound.
This is the last one, Prof. I think we
Thank
will
you.
close with this. One is on internship. Internship
Yes.
during remote engagement. How do we go about it? And then the other one I would want you to respond to is, how should faculty and basically institutional via learning drive this agenda? Especially given, I mean, through, this is from Rogers, how should faculty and higher education institutions drive this new agenda through mindset change? Moving away from this is how it has been done mentality, you know, that shift in mindset. So just respond to the internship one, and then how do we drive this new agenda of the mind shift?
Okay. For the internship, I think to me, the biggest challenge in internships is most internships were physical. You reported to a place and you were required to do so many hours of this in order to satisfy the requirements for the internship. Now, when we're coming to this, we're actually talking about risk. You're sending your student to a place, and of course, in an internship, most internships are not paid. So most employers do not have the incentive to put the most resources to an intern. You know, they're probably going to throw them the dirty work, the things that other people don't want to do, and so on. And so I will be very hesitant to actually physically take my students into an internship. And I think since we don't know how long this COVID thing is going to last, I think institutions might need to review their internships, the environments where the students go, and see whether they might need to improvise another alternative of actually getting those internships done. I know many students go and intern anywhere and basically find a credit supervisor to do it. You might want to direct your internships to specific hosts that basically guarantee some of those measures have been done. I think there's a real risk. There's actually, the fact is that this thing is deadly. So to send somebody in a situation that is potentially fatal can be very disturbing. So my recommendation will be find ways that the internship requirement can be met under the current circumstances. And that might be, changing the whole internship project to either be local or, otherwise. Now,
Okay. Seems we've lost Prof there. Prof?
I think I lost you for a minute.
Okay, yes.
Are we back?
Now.
Okay,
yes,
I'm sorry.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Now, I think we talked about the internship part. The thing is, I would rather that we changed the way, that takes us to the, this is a new environment. We have to change the way we do it in order to maintain the safety of our students. Now, in terms of mindset change, I think we are at a place where now the solution can come from anywhere. We don't know, there's no big or small. The solution can be anywhere. So we have to be willing to listen. And I think I hope what I convinced you is that even as teachers, we're now learning from our students. And for institutions, they are going to need to listen to the various stakeholders who have something to say. Because, when the playing field goes digital, your students can literally go anywhere. Students used to come to your school because it's the closest, or for some geographical reason they wanted to come. But now they don't have to come to your place. You have to turn out to be a better option than somebody else. And I think that is where the opportunity is. It's allowing us to get into the stadium and play. And whoever turns out the best gets to stay in the team while the others get kicked out. So this presents a really good opportunity for people to basically go out and try their skills, and whoever can adapt the most rapidly gets to win the day.
Well, thank you very much, Prof. Hey guys, wherever you are, maybe we can give a round of applause. I don't know how you'll do it. There are some emojis there. Prof, thank you very much for your time. I think you've been we've been engaging you for the last almost 3 hours, actually more.
Wow.
We very much appreciate that. Actually, this means a lot to us as a university, because we are really facing, the real job begins actually coming Monday, because our trimester begins coming Monday. And really we have to, with the speed of light, actually get ready so that we don't discourage our students. So thank you for being one of the people to prepare us for this task ahead. I think, I know Professor Bagaka is in a meeting. He may not be able to join us now, but I would really have loved that he gives a final word on this. But Prof, I'll just give you a minute to give your final remarks regarding this engagement we've had. Yeah.
Well, I just want to thank you. It's really a high honor for me to participate in this webinar. It has been something that I have desired to do for a long time. And, you know, there's always an itch you feel, you know, coming at home. Now, there's an institution out there with 30, 40,000 students. No digital platform, no connection. I mean, some schools in Africa today are waiting. I mean, not even in Africa, in Asia, different places. They are waiting for the president of the country to tell them when to go back, because there is not, even faculty don't have a way to contact each other. People don't have emails and so on. So this infrastructure, this is really disorienting for many places. And I think it forces us to look inwards and see where we can do things. And for some who have invested in the past and never seen why, now it is starting to make sense. Because imagine, if you did not have an online platform, there will be no student coming in to your school next week. But you know, those investments are paying back now. And I think I am not worried, because for those who have the opportunity, they are getting to be seen, and the leadership is coming from different places. And so we're learning that, you know, those investments are actually worth what we put in them. And even for us teachers now, whatever investment you made to make your digital presence and so on, now it's going to be a time that you actually reap some of that. And so, you know, don't feel bad. It's a lot of work. You might have to stay up long nights. There's going to be a lot of input in the beginning. But once things level out, you will be probably the one that is farther ahead than others, and so make things easy. So this is changing. So we must be willing to embrace the change. While we embrace the change, it doesn't mean we won't be working. We will be working, but it will be very satisfying when we look back and see how far we have come. So I want to thank you again for inviting me. I really feel very honored, and I look forward to interacting with you some more. Let this just be the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. And I think with those words, I know we are in touch after this. With those remarks, I think I would want to bring the webinar to an end, if you allow.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. And have a wonderful day. Okay.
Thank you. This is 10 minutes to 5, so I still am early.
The kids are not yet up. Yeah?
Not yet. We have another 30 minutes.
Okay, good. Okay,
Thank
have
you.
a wonderful day, Prof. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Yeah, bye-bye.